I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 173 of the podcast today. So today we got to sit down with Joe Sriver, one of the founders of 4giving. 4giving is a Minnesota-based business that helps take the fundraising needs off the plate of nonprofits to help them focus on their mission. 4giving has created a single platform where, with a few clicks of a button, nonprofits can get their fundraisers going and promoted within their networks, all using a single platform. So on the podcast today, we talk with Joe about 4giving, how this business started, and the challenges that they're currently facing. We also talk a lot about his entrepreneurial journey, which started at Google. He was actually the first UI designer at Google, and later went on to found the Rochester company DoApp in 2006. DoApp had 3 exits, the final of which took place in 2016. So this was the final podcast I got to record in person. So far this year, this is recorded on March 13th for your reference as you're listening in. So a lot has certainly changed during that time, and we talk a little bit about COVID-19 in the podcast today, but it certainly was not... had not impacted small businesses as much then as it has now. So you found our podcast in some way, but we are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can listen in on our YouTube channel and on our website. And on our website at rochesterrising.org, we have many other stories of entrepreneurship taking place in Rochester, so be sure to check it out. And if you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, we're always looking to bring on new sponsors to keep the Rochester Rising podcast going. So if this is of interest to you and your business, let us know. Send us an email at rochesterrising@gmail.com. All right, so now on to the podcast today with Joe Sriver of 4giving. Well, thanks for being here today, Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting towards spring. We'll see.
Right. Yeah, there's just a little bit of snow still on the ground, but
my yard still has some piles, but that's about it.
Right.
Give it another week.
Right.
Maybe this weekend. So yeah, thanks for coming down here today.
No
and
problem.
I wanted to start out by asking you, what's your favorite thing to do in your free time?
Sure. Well, I have 2 daughters, and so that means that there's not too much free time, so to speak. But my wife and daughters and I like to travel a lot when we get the chance. Ideally, we'll be gone for spring break, depending on how this virus stuff goes. But so basically, in the free time travel, but I'll always have my computer and phone ready. So I'm kind of working on the off peak hours too. So.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Right.
That's a fair answer. So your career's had multiple different lives, I feel like, with a lot of different things that you've done, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. Mm-hmm. But maybe we'll just start where you are now with 4giving and work backwards. So, for people listening, what is 4giving and what need did you see for this type of organization?
Sure. 4giving is, in its simplest form, is just a way for nonprofits or organizations to easily get a fundraiser up and going online. We take care of all the credit card processing and everything else. We give them after they sign up and they say, I want to raise $10,000, $20,000, whatever. We give them the webpage that they can advertise on Facebook or Twitter or any social media, and we try to handhold them through the process. So the main point is that a lot of these nonprofits are staffed by volunteers who are volunteering because they want to further the mission of the actual organization, and fundraising is good or bad part of that what they need to do, but it's not like it doesn't necessarily further their the mission per se, but it's needed, and so we try to kind of take the fundraising chore off their plate and help them easily kind of navigate through that and get funds to further their mission.
Yeah, like you said, it's something that kind of is needed for the business, but it's not like the full business. So
Right.
it's nice to have something kind of streamlined. So when nonprofits are using this platform, what's kind of their user experience like, and how does it kind of ease this process for them?
Sure. So my background is in user experience and UI. So that was one thing when I came on board. Our founder is in Rochester. His name is Chris, and he's in Rochester. Well, I guess he's not a Rochester native, but he lives here now. My goal with joining him and his mission is to just make the UI easy, just the process easy. They don't need to have all these tools or levers and everything. I'm looking at the soundboard right here. We're kind of anti that, where they can just go in there. They want to raise $10,000. They raise $10,000. Choose their organization, their nonprofit from a list that we have compiled, enter their title of their fundraiser, a description of their organization, hit go, and everything is automatically set up on the back end, and they can go off and work on their mission. So the experience in getting the users on the platform has been pretty easy. Last year we had to ramp up pretty quickly because we had a United Way of Olmsted County fundraiser that was here in town, and so there was a lot of design work that needed to be done, and even more development work. I was able to bring in a developer that I used to work with at a previous company that I was at called DoApp. His name is Pete, and he kind of took the reins and ran and got all the development work all set up in a matter of months, and we had a successful event here in Rochester for the United Way.
And how long has 4giving been in operation? It seemed like about 3 years. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. So Chris started 4giving in late 2017. And it started. He was unfortunately at I believe his grandfather's funeral, and the tray was being passed around for donations. He had given his last $20 to his daughter, I think, at the airport to buy a souvenir or something. And he didn't have any cash. He had his phone, but he didn't have a checkbook or any cash on him. So he had to pass the tray on. And he said, there should be a better way. And so that's kind of what the impetus of the original 4giving platform was, is this unique circumstance where he didn't have any cash. And I guess it's not really unique because I probably don't really carry cash right and I certainly don't carry a checkbook. But I do have my phone, which is essentially a point of sale system right in your pocket already. So he had the idea of bringing this all to mobile, and there's other competitors in the space that have similar concepts. I believe that we bring a kind of ease of use that's different from other people, and just all the services just in one platform altogether. For example, some of these services aren't available right now, but our roadmap shows that, and even people I've talked to, they use one service for emailing their campaigns, one service for advertising, one service to shoot it off in social media. So our goal is to kind of bring them all into one platform. So as a nonprofit, I can just go to one platform, click a couple buttons, get the fundraiser going, then send it off to Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, just so I don't have to have all these kind of cobbled together platforms all together trying to work all together and remember passwords and all that nonsense.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it bogs you down so much when you have all these different, like you said, passwords and people, especially if you have multiple different people and volunteers and they're using different passwords and different usernames, and it just takes so much time for you to do something that is necessary. Right.
And that said, though, there's a number of organizations that we talk to that are already fully invested in a particular CRM or whatever. And so all of our data can be exported and transferred into their system. So I always like to say that 4giving is kind of a component to your fundraising needs. I mean, for some people, it might be the full component that they just use 4giving 100%. Other times they're using other CRM tools to manage their donors and communication. So we're kind of a add-on to what they're already using, so we can work nicely with our competitors and colleagues.
Nice. So do you want to talk a little bit about the team behind 4giving? And it sounds like because you're in Minneapolis, right? So you're kind of split between Minneapolis and Rochester.
Yep. So the team is pretty small. Like I said, Chris, our founder, is here here in Rochester. Pete, our developer, is in Minneapolis, or Twin Cities in general. I'm in the Twin Cities. We have another half-time developer right now who's kind of in between the Twin Cities and Rochester. So we're spread out. We're a kind of mobile team and have a mobile product, so it makes sense.
And I'll ask you this question because I feel like it's going to be a question on every business's mind from this week onward, but how has kind of this coronavirus thing affected 4giving? Has it? And how has it changed anything you guys are doing?
Right. It hasn't affected us in the fact that we're all working from home
anyway. Yeah,
remotely. So we haven't had any, any kind of lockdown or anything. So from that perspective, it hasn't affected us. From a business standpoint, since we're just starting off, or relatively young in our at a young stage here, we haven't really seen any effect on our business as of today.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. We'll see how everything changes, especially restaurants and things like that. I think those will be kind of hit the hardest. But
I think I was when this started coming out, and I actually was listening to the radio on the way down here. And I was thinking actually last week that Netflix and these streaming services are going to, see a rise because if people are self-quarantining or just, staying at home more.
Yeah.
I think it's good or bad. It's a boom for streaming services.
For certain things, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But plenty of other things like restaurants and just theaters shutting down and everything else. It's unfortunate.
Yes, we disinfected pretty well this morning here.
Right,
I think we're going to do that every morning, which, it's not a bad thing.
Sure.
So like I said in the beginning, you've had a lot of different endeavors in your career between. Were you the first user designer at Google? Is that right?
I was.
Experience?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a fortunate thing. I was living in Rochester at the time. I was working at IBM. This was in the late 90s, and before that, I had experience on the West Coast in Oregon. I worked at Intel as an intern in the summer of '96, and kind of fell in love with the West Coast and made a trip down to the Bay Area at one point when I was out there, and just kind of loved the whole area and wanted to get out there. When I went back to school, in my final year, I went to Purdue University in Indiana. I had actually it was kind of an odd reason why I ended up at IBM. I was at a job fair in the fall, standing in line. I think it was Silicon Graphics that I think is now part of Sun, but they were big in the mid to late 90s. Silicon Graphics, that company. I was standing in their line. It was really long because it was a popular company and everybody wanted to work there. I looked over and I saw IBM had a booth and nobody was standing in line. So I thought, well, I'll just toss my resume in for whatever it's worth since there's no line. I don't even think I went back to Silicon Graphics, but the Silicon Graphics line. But anyways, initially they a person from Boca Raton, Florida, IBM facility there, interviewed me and then passed my resume on to Rochester. And honestly, I don't think I even knew where or I had heard of Rochester, Minnesota. I'd heard of Rochester, New York.
Right.
And that's what probably you get, when you're saying you're from Rochester. Oh, Rochester, New York? No.
Usually no one knows either.
Right. But I came up here and you really liked my time here and met a lot of great people, some people that I later started a startup with when I moved back. But back to the Google, yeah. So when I was here, I kind of similar to just the IBM story. I was interested in moving back out to the West Coast, just on not necessarily a whim, but I emailed a resume to Google back then and thought, if they answer, great. If they don't, that's fine too. I'm fine here. They did answer, and actually one of the first people to interview me was Marissa Meyer, who's now gone on to lead Yahoo and other places. She has a new startup now, but so it was interesting just to be there, kind of in the birth of Google, or near the birth of Google, and see it grow and prosper. And yeah, I was fortunate to be their first full-time UI designer.
That's amazing. And then when you were back here in Rochester, and I'm guessing like 2010, is that when DoApp was? It was pretty early.
So
right?
yeah, DoApp, it officially started before that in about late 2006. I was alone for a bit working on it. It was originally kind of a website widget company where let's create like little widgets to put on your blog or website. Then I tapped Wade Beavers and Dave Brillo, who were at that point at IBM. Those are two folks that I met at IBM. And back when I was there, we always talked about random ideas that we had, but there was no collider at that point to kind of guide us on our way for a startup. Anyway, I tapped their shoulders and say, hey, are you at a point in your career where you want to do something else? And fortunately they were, and they jumped ship after being there. Well, Dave, I think, was there for about 20 years or more, and Wade had been there for about 10 years or so. So fortunately they were at a point in their career where they can kind of step away, and they joined, and Dave and Wade both had some experience at IBM with mobile devices. And in 2007, I think 2007 was the year when the iPhone was introduced. And then I believe it was 2008 when the App Store came out. So we were definitely got in there at the right time. I think I forget the exact stats. I think initially 1,000 app developers were accepted into the store, and we put our name in the hat, and we're thinking, well, being in Rochester and Minneapolis, there's probably, we're in flyover country, so we're probably not going to be seen by anybody. But fortunately, we got into the 100 applicants, the 1,000 applicants, I think it was, that got in the store originally. Well, not in the store, but as in the developer network. Then in the store, when they announced that the store was going to open, I think in July of, I believe it was 2008, they said they were only going to accept 500 apps. So then we said, okay, this is where we're going to be cut, and nothing. But somebody shined the light on us, and we had 3 of the first 500 apps in the store. So that was pretty amazing that we got that. And then so we at the beginning we were kind of doing random apps, kind of seeing what stuck on a wall. Wade, I eventually gave the CEO reins to Wade, and he was able to kind of focus. We were somewhat unfocused, but still focused. We were kind of in 3 different verticals: real estate, medical, and news and information. So the medical vertical that we were in was a partnership with Mayo at the time. We had kind of a 50-50 partnership with them. That platform, that was a mobile medical platform that was sold in 2012. The real estate platform, Dave Barillo, my colleague, headed that up, and that was sold in 2014. And then the news and information platform, which was kind of the essentially our bread and butter, we had about, when we sold, we had about 300 to 400 or so news stations and newspapers and TV news stations. A couple in Rochester, in fact, and a couple in the cities, and elsewhere, Boston Herald and Boston Globe. I think there's a Chicago, some Illinois or Chicago-based paper. Anyway, we had plenty of them all around the United States and some around the world. We sold that in 2016 to a company called News Cycle. Now they go as Naviga. So anyway, we had a good ride for about 10, 15 years there. So
yeah, absolutely.
We were able to kind of see the rise of mobile, and obviously it's still rising, but
yes, always changing.
Right.
So how did kind of lessons learned through all those experiences apply to what you're doing now? What lessons have you taken?
So though I wasn't doing UI work at my startup DoApp, we had an excellent designer whose name is Jim, and I didn't do too much UI work there, but now that we're a smaller team at 4giving, a full-time developer, me and our advisors, I've been kind of stepping into the UI role again, so that's been good to kind of get up to speed with the new tools that have come on board in the last 10, 15 years. But I think that the main skills that I learned actually, and this is hats off, and I've told him too, is to Wade, just his leadership skills that I've been trying to kind of formulate. I don't have any formal business experience, but and Wade didn't either, but he's just kind of a natural, and so I've been kind of taking his guidance and what I learned from him through his tenure at Google to help with my kind of leadership roles at 4giving.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people don't have any leadership training or business development
training.
Right,
yeah, especially in the startup and entrepreneurial community.
Yeah, like we were just talking about lean startup when you came in, but that's a generally relatively newer even concept of teaching that way.
Right, and I think that's why places like Collider are important in that, people have a great idea, but they, don't have the business background to start it up. And I think that's, in 2007, 2008, we didn't have a place like Collider, but now that these places exist, it's great that, a person can say, hey, I need help, and you're right there to help them out.
Yeah, I think it allows there are other people like you building stuff too. Otherwise,
Right.
It's like very isolated.
Right. Yeah, I was telling Jamie earlier that back when I was here in the late 90s in the Rochester, I kind of had to seek out people that were kind of like-minded. I think there were a lot of entrepreneurs then, probably just as many as there are now, but they didn't have any kind of means to coalesce and find each other.
Yeah, that makes it hard to even know like what the community's like and to get that support, like you said. So, I think that transitions nicely into what I was going to ask you next.
Sure.
You've been entrepreneurial, been innovative for years. So, what kind of motivates you to go out and do your own things instead of going back to work for Google or working for IBM?
Right. I think I've thought about this question, and I don't have a solid answer necessarily, but I think it's probably just what motivates all entrepreneurs is that they see a problem and they think that they have a solution, and I'm sure that many or the majority or all of them do have a great solution, and so you want to kind of test it out. And fortunately, with my time at IBM and Google and also DoApp, I can have the knowledge and skills to kind of see in this case 4giving through and see if the ideas that we have for the space can fly, and obviously there's help like with Collider or other organizations in the cities that help me out, and I can share and learn from people that are in my network. And so I think that's what motivates me, just seeing that I have an idea and see if it can fly. I think it's a good one, and being able to test it out.
Yeah, and it's interesting too how there's definitely a pretty strong support system in Minneapolis, St. Paul as well. That's very different from Rochester, and it's interesting that we're so close. But the communities I think are very different. I started out in the startup scene in Minneapolis, learning about it that way, and yeah, completely different than here in Rochester.
Right. Yeah, and I thought like in the maybe 10 years ago I was pretty well connected to the startup scene and entrepreneurial scene in Minneapolis, but you start opening up new doors and like, there's all these people and ideas that are there, and it's just I might know maybe 10% of or even less of what's all available, even just in the Twin Cities, and I've seen in the last 15 years since I've been back to the Twin Cities and Minnesota in general, just the skyrocket and kind of startup and not just tech startups, but just startups in general and entrepreneurialism in the cities as well as Rochester. I'm down here quite a bit, and just certainly since I've been here in the late 90s, there's it's skyrocketed.
Yeah, I feel like there's just a huge growth of accelerator programs like Generator, and they had it was either Techstars or Target. I realize those are two very different things, but the farm to fork. Maybe it was Techstars and Target.
So Techstars used to be with Target, then and yeah, I've been involved with that program too up in the cities. Then they Techstars, or I'm sorry, Target. I think they kind of took out their kind of entrepreneurial startup component, and Techstars moved on. I think Techstars Farm to Fork now is with Ecolab and Cargill.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Those are the two partners there.
Yeah. There's just a lot going on in that scene. A lot going on in Rochester here, and they're filling different needs for the community where it is at that point.
Right. But I think there's definitely room for just collaboration between, not just Minnesota specifically or organizations in Minnesota, but I know Generators started in Madison, Wisconsin, I believe, and then they moved to the Twin Cities, and I've been fortunate to be involved in those, and people like Great North Labs, the Weber brothers, they've made a point to kind of gather a lot of people just in the Midwest, but also from the coast too, just to say we're here and doing stuff too.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. So we were part of this Launch Minnesota grant network that came out I guess we just officially got notice of it a couple weeks ago, maybe like 2 weeks ago. Time has an interesting way of moving quickly or slowly at times, but basically just like an ecosystem grant to help support educational efforts in like the whole Southeast Minnesota community. So the grant went through Red Wing Ignite, but we were a partner on it, as well as a bunch of other organizations ready in the community, like Ready, St. Mary's University, Red Wing Ignite. I'm trying to think who else. There's a bunch. Winona State, out in Austin, the Startup Factory doesn't exist anymore, but I think it's called Launch Austin now. But anyway, Great North Labs, being able to partner with them through Red Wing Ignite to do lean startup teaching, but just allowing more crosstalk or supporting the crosstalk that was already happening. Jamie and I were talking about this last week on a podcast that's probably going to come out right before this one, but we're not the Twin Cities, but if you think geographically, or even just like how far it takes to drive from Austin to Winona, it's probably about the same from the southwest suburb to the northeast suburb.
The Twin Cities,
just, thinking about our resources differently, because they're just more spread out, but they're here.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of the challenges that each city or each kind of region faces are similar, and I'm glad that there's people in each place that want to reach out, and it doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel. You can just reach out, and I think the startup community or entrepreneurial community is generally open to. They're not kind of closed up and want to keep ideas to themselves. They just want to share.
Yeah, I think even as service providers, we're in a good space in Southeast Minnesota, understanding that maybe it's because no one has the capacity, the human capacity to, do everything that they want to do. So just understanding that. So we'll see how it goes. It seems to be going to be a fruitful collaboration.
Right. Yeah,
so I'm
definitely
excited. So what do you see as your next big challenge with 4giving?
So we have a great platform that's developed, and we basically are now looking, and now the next step is kind of finding people to use it. So, you can have a nice building, but if nobody's renting it or whatever, then it's worthless. So that's the next challenge. It's more of a sales challenge, which is, I'll admit, is a challenge for me. I don't have much sales experience, but just making sure that people know the benefits of 4giving, and how it can benefit their organization, and also just like I said before, 4giving is a component to the whole fundraising kind of model that organizations have. It's not necessarily going to be the end all of your 4giving or your fundraising needs, but it can work with other systems and everything else. So in summary, basically that. It's just now getting the word out and about 4giving and its ease of use, and how all the tools are right there for you, and you can easily, for small to medium-sized nonprofits, can easily ramp up and ideally we'll be at a point where we can kind of take a lot of the fundraising stuff that organizations have to do off their plate, so they can again focus on their mission and do their work well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have some final questions for you as we're nearing the end here. So you lived in Rochester for a while, spent some time here. What was your favorite place or location to be at in Rochester?
One thing I miss a lot, and I was a big biker when I was in Rochester, and I really miss the trails. And the trails exist elsewhere and in the cities. I think just the ease of getting to the trails was nice.
Yeah.
I lived in northeast Rochester when I was here, and so I was able to get on, I think it was, is it the Douglas Trail that goes up to
Douglas,
Pine? Yeah. And just all the trails, I mean, they're all interconnected. So I miss that aspect and need to get into biking again. But I think the bike trails and just the trail system in general is what I miss most about Rochester.
Yeah, Twin Cities does have I lived in Apple Valley for 3 years, so
Okay.
I'd run from Apple Valley to Burnsville to then I think it's Rosemont. Roseville's in the northeast. I think it's Rosemount, but yeah. It was crazy. You could just run for an hour and be in another town there.
So there, the trail system in the cities is great too. And it's my fault for not exploring it more and being bogged down in work. But
in life in general.
It's something that just like anything, you need to concentrate on and do it, and then you get in the habit.
Yeah. What are you reading or listening to right now?
So I used to be when in my car ride down to Rochester here and back up to the Twin Cities, I used to listen to How I Built This, that podcast. That was interesting. Right now, I don't think I have it with me. I forget actually it's an audiobook that I've been reading. And now I need to look on my
I never know the actual name of anything.
phone here. I download a fair amount of audiobooks thinking that, I'll have time to read it, and then
they take a
end
long
up
time.
doing something else. But so one of the, actually, I think this was a book that was. Oops.
It's just gonna play itself.
That was a book that was. I heard a friend of mine out in the valley. He was interviewed on a podcast, I think, and he said one of his favorite books was Never Split the Difference.
Oh.
And so then I downloaded it and started listening to it the other day, and it is good. Like I said, I'll listen to a book and then take notes on it, but then never remember the author or the title, unfortunately. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot of one of the services I use to find books is called BookBub, and so they kind of highlight some books. Another one is I think it's called Chirp, where I think Chirp is the one that kind of takes some popular titles and kind of it's like a Cliff Notes version of just a summary of the book. So I've listened to some of those, but yeah, there's plenty of books, and particular in their specific the specific area that you're in, or just general business books. I generally go to just more maybe general books that where the lessons can be applied broadly to what you're doing.
Yeah. I wish I had more time to read. It's one of the
right.
The audiobooks take me a very long time to get through. What's been one resource, whether it's Rochester or Minneapolis based, that's been really useful for you with 4giving, or maybe with DoApp if you think back to that time?
Sure. I think just I never saw myself as a networker, but I've joined Generator and the Techstars program, and also Great North Labs, and I think just kind of opening yourself up to those organizations, and they, the people that you meet through that, they have other contacts, and it's kind of interesting how it works. I mentioned 4giving or even DoApp, and they say, "Oh yeah, I know someone's doing something similar," or just in the fundraising space in general. I think a lot of just even my neighbors, have, I think everybody has some cause, or mostly everybody has some cause that they promote or they donate to, and so obviously that's someone that 4giving can use. So there's kind of in there to find new organizations to reach out to. So I think just with 4giving in particular, when I mentioned, I'm working on this fundraising platform, and then they say, oh, I know somebody at, XYZ organization. And then I have it in there. So it's been.
So like a natural progression. Yeah.
Right.
Natural connections.
Right.
So my last question for you is to ask you for any final thoughts and where people can find out more about 4giving.
Sure. I think my final thought is just for all entrepreneurs and startups that I was talking to Jamie here at Collider earlier, and there's services to help you hone your idea and find new resources to jumpstart your idea. And that's not something that wasn't here when I was here 20 plus years ago. And I think if people have an idea that they want to, seek, and just, I think coming to Collider or the equivalent places in the Twin Cities, it's good for them just to get the idea out in the open and not necessarily worry that someone's going to steal the idea, but just the more you share, the more that I think people will be attracted to you and give you their thoughts and kind of help you hone your idea.
Absolutely. And where can people find 4giving
Sure,
on the web?
4giving is 4giving.com. So that's the number 4, GIVING.com. And yeah, it's easy to start up. There's no fees that we take. We work on tips, in fact. So like if someone gives like $25, they have the option of giving 4giving a tip just to keep the service free for the organizations that use it. So I think a lot of our competitors have like a subscription fee. The issue that I see with that, it's great that if a person's paying $100, $200, $300 a month, but if an organization, a small to medium-sized organization, isn't using the service, then they're still paying. So
Right.
So we just kind of get paid when the service is used for the organization. So we have a free model, and it's easy. It's a self-serve sign up, so it's easy just to sign up and get something going within 5 minutes.
Nice.
And also to add it to add the donation button to your site or donation widget to your site, takes, if you have access to the code, it's takes another 5 minutes. So 10, 20 minutes, you can have a fundraiser going on your site.
Yeah, that's like key. Like we were saying, streamline the whole process, because it's something most people aren't used to doing.
Right. And they don't have, it's no fault of their own, but they don't have technical experience, and they just want something easy. And if we can kind of take that layer of tech off the top and just have them use the tool easily, and then they like it.
Well, thanks so much for your time today visiting us down in Rochester. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much to Joe for being on the podcast today. You can find more about 4giving at 4giving.com. That's 4giving.com. The 4giving platform always took no fees, but right now they're also covering all credit card processing fees related to fundraising campaigns to help businesses and nonprofits during this special time of need. So if you're a nonprofit or a business that needs some financial help, consider starting a 4giving campaign. Again, you can find more information and start your campaign quickly at 4giving.com, and you can find that link in our show notes as well. So we're always looking for great Rochester-based entrepreneurs to have on the podcast. So if you know someone with a great story to tell, let us know and send us an email at rochesterrising@gmail.com. You can find us on our website. We also are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's a wrap for our podcast today. Be sure that you subscribe to the Rochester Rising podcast wherever you listen into your podcast content so that you never miss a story of entrepreneurship and innovation coming out of Rochester, Minnesota. We'll be here next Wednesday with a brand new episode.